In the news tonight, King Abdullah holds talks in Tirana with Albanian President Bujar Nishani on ways to enhance cooperation between the two countries and enter into partnerships in various sectors. Saudi-led airstrikes continue to hit Houthi targets in Yemen as UN organizations prepare to send humanitarian aid into the country once an agreed truce begins in the coming hour. And the European Union's Executive Commission is expected to unveil tomorrow a plan that will call for a quota system, sharing out the number of legal migrants taken in across the EU bloc. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty King Abdullah held talks in Albania with President Bujar Nishani on his first visit to the Balkan Muslim nation. His Majesty voiced hope his visit would usher in closer ties between the two countries in various fields. Nishani, for his part, underlined Jordan's efforts to achieve regional peace and stability and thanked His Majesty for his supportive stand towards Kosovo. On concluding his visit to Albania, King Abdullah heads to Germany for talks with Chancellor Angela Merkel and other senior German officials. Here's more.
His Majesty the King and the Albanian President both welcomed enhanced cooperation in various fields to capitalize on the existing strong political ties the two leaders share. They also discussed developments in the Middle East, especially the repercussions of the Syrian crisis on Jordan, the situation in Iraq, as well as other regional conflicts.
Our talks today moved our countries closer towards building greater bilateral cooperation and exchanges, and Jordan is keen to see this relationship advance and strengthen.
Albanian President Bujar Nishani hailed His Majesty's visit as a fruitful opportunity to advance ties and expand cooperation between the two countries. He viewed Jordan as an oasis of security and stability and a gateway to the region. He thanked His Majesty for Jordan's supportive stance to Kosovo and its just cause.
Aside from the strong political relations we share, there is a good potential for cooperation in several other fields. I believe this visit will provide incentives to strengthen our bilateral ties in key areas, namely in the economic, educational and scientific fields, as well as in the tourism sector. Albania was very supportive of Jordan's candidacy in the United Nations Security Council for the years 2014 and 2015. And we value the role the Kingdom is playing under the leadership of His Majesty King Abdullah to promote international peace and security in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. Albanians also highly appreciate Jordan's recognition of Kosovo's independence in 2009, being the first country to take that decision.
His Majesty said Jordan and Albania are countries where Muslims and Christians live side by side and therefore are required to promote the messages of tolerance, moderation and coexistence.
Albania, a country of Muslim and Christians living side by side, like Jordan, knows that what is more essential than the military battle is the battle of hearts and minds to spread the messages of tolerance, moderation and religious coexistence. We in Jordan as well are actively contributing to the inter and interfaith initiatives, as you know, promoting peaceful dialogue, and I'm pleased to know that we have like-minded partners in this country.
His Majesty also met with the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, who voiced his country's interest to boost relations with Jordan and benefit from the Kingdom's expertise in various fields. The talks dealt with the situation in the Muslim world and efforts to address extremism. And in this context, His Majesty highlighted the Kingdom's efforts to serve pan-Muslim causes. Nancy Khair for the news at 10.
Saudi-led airstrikes hit the Yemeni capital Sana'a just hours before the 5-day humanitarian ceasefire was set to begin. 3 airstrikes hit a base for army units loyal to the Houthis in the north of the capital. In the southern port of Aden, the alliance bombed Houthi positions while local armed groups continued to fight the rebels in the city and throughout Yemen's south. The coalition has been bombing Houthi rebels and allied army units since March with the aim of restoring exiled President Abd Rabbo Mansour Hadi. In Geneva, meanwhile, UNHCR spokesman Adrian Edwards urged all parties to observe the 5-day ceasefire due to come into place at 11 p.m. in less than an hour from now to allow humanitarian assistance into the country. UN agencies are preparing to scale up aid delivery in a coordinated effort. Planes were poised to take off from Dubai, bearing 300 tons of sleeping mats, blankets, and tent material. The World Food Programme plans to distribute emergency food rations with specific food products for children under 5 and pregnant women. The World Health Organization will deliver 11 metric tons of medical kits and blood bags, as well as giving much-needed assistance to hospitals that are facing constant power outages. According to the WHO, more than 1,400 people have been killed and more than 6,000 injured since the conflict escalated in March.
All parties to observe the ceasefire in full, to respect international humanitarian law and cease any targeting of civilians or civilian infrastructure, and to allow the urgent delivery of aid to tens of thousands of vulnerable Yemenis and refugees who desperately need some respite. Across the country, there are now 300,000 people displaced just by the recent conflict.
And looking to prepare for the truce and jumpstart stalled political talks among the country's civil war factions, the new UN envoy to Yemen, Ismail Wild Sheikh Ahmed, is in Sana'a. He says fighting would not resolve a conflict that crosses ethnic and religious fault lines, and there's no solution except through dialogue. Here at home, the 5th extraordinary session of the General Conference for the Arab League Educational, Cultural and Scientific Organization, Alexo, opened in Amman today. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour opened the conference, expected to discuss the 2017-2022 Alexo Future Action Plan to achieve multidimensional development and the advancement of educational, cultural and scientific aspects of the Alexo program. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education, Mohammed Nebat, said the conference aims to adopt a future work draft plan for Alexo for the next 5 years. Mansour met with Arab education ministers and members of delegations taking part in the conference. He reviewed with them Jordan's achievements in the educational field and in eradicating illiteracy. The delegations valued the kingdom's distinguished achievements despite shortages and challenges. Separately, the Prime Minister received Dutch Defence Minister Janine Hennis Plasschaert at talks. During the meeting dealt with the situation in the region and the repercussions of regional crises on the kingdom. And so it pointed to the waves of migrants that Jordan had received over the past decades that is placing enormous pressure on its already scarce resources. Just as people have started rebuilding their lives, a fresh 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck Nepal today, killing at least 40 people and leaving 1,000 injured. The quake hit the mountainous region near the border with Tibet and Mount Everest, triggering landslides and destroying buildings. Tremors were felt in India, Bangladesh and China. Nepal is still picking up the pieces from the devastation caused by last month's 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which killed more than 8,000 people and injured close to 18,000. Here's
The tremor hit at around 12:30 p.m. local time, sending panicked residents of Kathmandu rushing into the streets. The quake was centered near the town of Namche Bazar, close to Mount Everest and the border with Tibet, but could be felt as far away as northern India and Bangladesh.
I think it's a really big hit of earthquake because the gate has also slanted and every pole are moving like that they will fall again.
People were seen frantically trying to reach relatives on their cell phones. Streets were jammed as people rushed home to check on their loved ones. Nepal's parliament was in session at the time. Politicians were forced to flee as the ground shook. Nepal's Home Ministry says at least 19 people were killed in this latest tremor and nearly 1,000 others injured. But the UN says they, quote, fear the worst. Many of the buildings that came down this time had already been weakened by last month's quake, the worst in this Himalayan country in over 80 years.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry held direct talks in what was the highest-level U.S. visit to Russia since the Ukraine crisis began in late 2013. Among the issues discussed in the meeting in the Black Sea resort of Sochi was the conflict in Ukraine, Syria's civil war, Iran nuclear talks, Yemen and Libya. Putin's spokesman called the meeting a positive step, adding that the Russian president was prepared for extensive discussions. The U.S. State Department spokeswoman said Kerry's trip was part of the United States' ongoing effort to maintain direct lines of communication with senior Russian officials and to ensure U.S. views were clearly conveyed. The Russian news agency TASS said a shift in political and diplomatic dialogue between Moscow and Washington should be expected from the Putin-Kerry meeting. The European Union's Executive Commission is expected to unveil tomorrow a plan that will call for a quota system sharing out the number of legal migrants taken in across the EU bloc. The purpose is to ease the burden on the region's southern states, notably Italy, with the southern Sicilian island of Lampedusa being the first point in Europe to be reached by thousands of people after having been rescued at sea. But support to the quota is split, with Britain already saying it would not participate in such a plan. Europe appealed to the United Nations Security Council yesterday to back its plan to stem the flow of migrants by dismantling people smuggling organizations and destroying their vessels. But non-governmental organizations such as Save the Children say the first step should be the quota system.
It's very important. Last year, Italy received 170,000 migrants, and so far this year, they've received more than 32,000. So the Italian Coast Guard and other facilities are very stretched, and we feel it's important for there to be a shared responsibility for these migrants who have made the crossing and who, in the coming months, there will be more.
And to another migrants crisis in Asia, woe to several thousand migrants, many of them hungry and sick, are adrift in boats in Southeast Asian seas. The UNHCR appealed to authorities in Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia not to push back boats that are packed with refugees who have been abandoned by smugglers following a Thai government crackdown on traffickers. The appeal came following a surge in migrants from Bangladesh and Myanmar to Malaysia and Indonesia, following the clampdown in Thailand, usually the first destination in the region's people smuggling network. An estimated 25,000 Bangladeshis and Rohingya boarded rickety smugglers' boats in the first 3 months of this year, twice as many in the same period of 2014, the UNHCR has said.
Today, UNHCR is calling for a massive search and rescue operation to try and find these people. And these people, because they've been stuck out at sea for weeks, for months, they've been held on these ships, and then the smugglers just deserted them and left them with very little food, very little water, no fuel for the engines, and they've been drifting. So it's something that really is a massive humanitarian crisis waiting to happen, and we're hoping that the international community will step up and try and resolve the problem.
Barack Obama's presidential library will be built in his hometown of Chicago, beating out proposals by New York City and Hawaii to host the facility. A proposal from the University of Chicago, where Obama was a law professor and near where he has a home on the city's south side, was chosen by the Obama Foundation. The foundation, a non-profit organization, conducted the site selection and will oversee the development and building of the library. The President and First Lady appeared in a video produced by the foundation announcing the news of the library's Chicago location. Obama is due to leave office in January 2017 after 2 terms in the White House.
Exists in Chicago. I consider myself a Southsider.
All the strands of my life came together, and I really became a man when I moved to Chicago. That's where I was able to apply that early idealism to try to work in communities, in public service. That's where I met my wife. That's where my children were born, and the people there the community, the lessons that I learned, they're all based right in this few square miles where we'll be able to now give something back and bring the world back home after this incredible journey.
With jet-powered carbon fiber wings strapped to their backs, jetmen Yves Rossi and Vince Refet soared over the skies of Dubai in what the daring duo is calling the first ever twin human formation. After jumping out a helicopter, they powered their wings and flew for 10 minutes over Dubai's skies, diving and performing acrobatic stunts before pulling their parachutes and gently floating back down to the ground. During flight, they reached speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour. To date, Rossi has conducted winged flights over the Swiss Alps, the English Channel, and the Grand Canyon. Refet, on the other hand, has no formal pilot training, but has completed over 15,000 skydiving jumps in his career, including base jumping from Burj Khalifa and jumping 10,000 meters over Mont Blanc in France. Underway in Munich right now is the Champions League semi-final second leg between Barcelona and Bayern Munich, with Barca designing on confirming their spot in the final. Bayern will have to overturn a 3-0 first leg deficit. Though the match could be difficult given that Bayern has a lot of injured players, but it is not impossible. David Alaba, Arjen Robben, Frank Ribery and Holger Badstuber are all still out. So far, Barcelona are leading 2-1, 2 goals from Neymar, and Bayern's goal came from Mehdi Benatia. And Real Madrid hosts Juventus for the return leg tomorrow. The European champions need to overturn a 2-1 deficit from the first leg that they lost in Turin last week. The Los Blancos will continue to be without Luka Modric, but forward Karim Benzema will be available after being sidelined for around a month with a knee problem. Real Madrid are battling to become the first team to win the Champions League 2 times in a row, as ending the season without winning the Champions League, the La Liga title or the Copa del Rey would be a disaster for the world's richest club by income. And finally, for a quick look at the weather, be cool in hilly areas for the rest of the night with northwesterly moderate to brisk winds. Tomorrow, moderate summer conditions prevail in most regions and relatively hot in the Jordan Valley with southwesterly moderate to brisk winds. Temperatures in the Gulf of Aqaba will be in the mid-30s Celsius during the day, dropping to the mid-20s at night with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. King Abdullah holds talks in Tirana with Albanian President Bujar Nishani on ways to enhance cooperation between the two countries and enter into partnerships in various sectors. Saudi-led airstrikes continue to hit Houthi targets in Yemen as UN organizations prepare to send humanitarian aid into the country once an agreed truce begins in the coming hour. And the European Union's Executive Commission is expected to unveil tomorrow a plan that will call for a quota system, sharing out the number of legal migrants taken in across the EU bloc. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Ali Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.